Ambassador Zektar's four eyes blinked in rapid succession as he reviewed the datapad for the third time. The numbers couldn't be right. According to every mathematical model the Galactic Council possessed, the species calling themselves humans should have conquered half the galaxy by now. Instead, they seemed content managing a mere 12 solar systems, trading peacefully with neighbors and sending polite diplomatic messages. "This is highly irregular," muttered Councillor Vrix, her crystalline form shimmering with confusion. Their military capabilities exceed those of the Krellian Empire at its peak, yet they've shown no signs of expansion beyond their designated territory. The holographic display showed Earth's solar system in detail. Ships moved between planets with precision that made veteran pilots weep with envy. Their manufacturing capabilities could outfit armies that would make the ancient destroyer fleets look like children's toys. Most disturbing of all, their technological advancement rate suggested they'd discovered principles of physics that the Council's greatest minds considered theoretical impossibilities. Zektar adjusted his ceremonial robes, the weight of his responsibility pressing down like gravity from a neutron star. As head of the Threat Assessment Division, he'd cataloged the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations. The pattern was always the same. A species would develop faster than light travel, expand aggressively, consume resources, clash with neighbors, and either burn out in warfare or establish dominance through conquest. Humans broke every rule. "Show me the military analysis again," he commanded. The display shifted to show human warships. At first glance, they appeared unremarkable. Standard hulls, conventional weapon placements, nothing that screamed superiority. But the details told a different story. The metallurgy reports indicated hull compositions that could withstand direct hits from plasma cannons that would vaporize Galactic Council vessels. Their energy signatures suggested power cores that operated on principles the Council's scientists were still trying to understand. "The concerning part isn't their capability," said Dr. Omnis, the Council's chief xenobiologist. His tentacles writhed nervously as he spoke. "It's their restraint. We've observed 17 separate incidents where human vessels encountered hostile forces. In each case, they used minimum necessary force to neutralize threats, then offered medical assistance to survivors." Vrix's crystalline form flickered. "Perhaps they're simply cautious? Testing galactic response before revealing their true intentions?" "That was our initial hypothesis," Zektar replied. "But their behavioral patterns suggest something else entirely. They seem genuinely committed to peaceful coexistence. The evidence was overwhelming and baffling. Human colonies showed no signs of resource exploitation beyond sustainable levels. Their trade agreements consistently favored their partners. When the mining conflict erupted between the Felnari and the Korgan clans, human mediators had somehow negotiated a solution that left both sides satisfied, despite the fact that the humans could have simply taken the disputed asteroid belt by force. "We need to understand their motivations," Zektar decided. "Initiate a formal diplomatic contact. Full honors, maximum respect protocols." 3 days later, Captain Sarah Chen stepped aboard the Council flagship Eternal Wisdom. She moved with the casual confidence of someone comfortable with their place in the universe, neither arrogant nor submissive. Her small diplomatic team consisted of just 5 individuals, a laughably tiny delegation by galactic standards. "Ambassador Zektar," she said, offering a slight bow that somehow conveyed both respect and equality. "Thank you for the invitation. We're honored to finally meet face to face." The greeting room had been designed to accommodate dozens of species, with environmental controls for everything from methane breathers to silicon-based life forms. Captain Chen seemed perfectly at ease despite being surrounded by beings that could crush her without effort. "Captain Chen," Zektar replied, his translator working overtime to convey proper diplomatic nuances. "We have many questions about your people." "I'm sure you do," she smiled. "We have questions about you as well. The galaxy is a fascinating place." Over the following hours, Zektar found himself increasingly confused. Captain Chen answered questions directly and honestly, showed genuine interest in council member species, and demonstrated knowledge of galactic politics that suggested extensive study. When asked about human military capabilities, she neither boasted nor deflected. "We've learned that strength without wisdom leads to destruction," she explained. "Our history taught us that lesson rather harshly. But surely you understand the advantages expansion would bring." Councillor Vrix pressed. "Resources, territory, security through dominance." Captain Chen was quiet for a moment, considering her words carefully. We found that cooperation brings better results than conquest. When we help our neighbors prosper, we prosper too. When we take what we need instead of what we want, there's enough for everyone. Dr. Omnis leaned forward, his scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic protocol. Your species possesses capabilities that could easily dominate this region of space. How do you resist the temptation? The same way we resist the temptation to destroy ourselves, Captain Chen replied. We learned that just because we can do something doesn't mean we should. Power without restraint is just another form of weakness. As the day wore on, Zektar realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Not a species hiding its time before conquest, not a civilization too weak to expand, but a people who had genuinely chosen a different path. The implications were staggering. When the meeting concluded, Captain Chen extended an invitation that left the council speechless. We'd like to invite a council delegation to visit Earth, she said. Not for negotiations or treaties, just to meet our people and see how we live. We think you might find it interesting. After the human delegation departed, the council chambers erupted in debate. Some members insisted it was an elaborate trap. Others argued that humans were simply too alien to understand. But Zektar found himself thinking about Captain Chen's words and the quiet confidence in her eyes. Prepare a delegation, he announced finally. We're going to Earth. The decision would change everything they thought they knew about power, civilization, and what it truly meant to be an advanced species. The council delegation ship Harmony's Edge dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, and immediately every sensor array began screaming warnings. Not warnings of danger, but of impossibility. These readings can't be accurate, Chief Navigator Kirill announced, his 6 arms working frantically over the control interfaces. I'm detecting energy signatures that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of physics. Ambassador Zektar studied the tactical display with growing amazement. The system was alive with activity, but it was unlike anything in the galactic databases. Massive structures orbited between planets, some clearly industrial, others serving purposes the Council's best minds couldn't identify. Ships moved in patterns that suggested traffic control on a scale that dwarfed the busiest trade routes. The power generation alone, whispered Dr. Omnis, his tentacles practically vibrating with excitement. They're harnessing energy directly from their star using orbital collectors. The efficiency rates are impossible. Counselor Vrix's crystalline form shifted through colors indicating deep confusion. The resource management implications are staggering. With this level of energy production, they could support populations in the trillions. How many humans live in this system? Asked Zektar. Dr. Omnis consulted his datapad. Approximately 8 billion on the primary world, with another 2 billion, distributed across colonies and orbital habitats. The numbers didn't add up. With the infrastructure the sensors were detecting, humans could easily support 100 times their current population. Instead, they seemed to have deliberately limited their growth while maximizing their technological capabilities. Incoming transmission, announced Communications Officer Kelthera. It's Captain Chen. The holographic projection showed the human captain standing on what appeared to be a command bridge, but the design was unlike any warship the Council had encountered. The walls seemed organic, almost grown rather than built, and the interface systems responded to thought as much as touch. Welcome to Sol, Captain Chen said warmly. We've prepared quarters for your delegation aboard Harmony Station. It's one of our diplomatic facilities, designed to accommodate multiple species comfortably. As their ship approached the station, the delegation got their first close look at human construction techniques. Harmony Station was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, but it moved through space with the grace of a living creature. Gardens were visible through transparent sections, creating a sense of life and growth that made traditional metal corridors seem sterile by comparison. How is this possible? Kirill muttered. The structural engineering required to build something this large and keep it stable. Perhaps, said Zektar thoughtfully. We've been thinking about construction all wrong. The docking process was seamless, guided by systems that anticipated every need. As the delegation disembarked, they were greeted by a human welcoming committee, that included representatives from various Earth cultures. The diversity was immediately striking. Humans came in varieties the Council had never imagined possible. Dr. Sarah Kim, the station's administrator, stepped forward with a warm smile. "Welcome to Harmony Station. We're excited to share our home with you." The quarters prepared for each delegation member were perfect, down to atmospheric composition and gravity settings. But more impressive than the technical accommodations were the thoughtful touches. Art from each member's homeworld, food synthesizers, programmed with familiar flavors and environmental sounds that provided psychological comfort. This level of cultural research and consideration, Dr. Omnis noted privately to Zektar, suggests they've been studying us for far longer than we realized. During their first meal together, the humans shared stories of their history with a candor that left the council members stunned. They spoke openly about wars, environmental destruction, social injustices, and near-extinction events with the matter-of-fact tone of people who had learned from their mistakes. "We almost destroyed ourselves several times," Dr. Kim explained. "Nuclear weapons, climate change, resource depletion, artificial intelligence disasters. Each time we had to choose between repeating our mistakes or evolving beyond them." "How did you make that choice?" asked Counselor Vrix. "Painfully," replied Dr. Kim. "And not all at once. It took generations of work, countless failures, and a fundamental shift in how we think about success." The conversation was interrupted by a young human child who had somehow wandered into the diplomatic dining area. Instead of being rushed away by security, the adults simply made space at the table. The child, perhaps 6 years old, looked around at the assembled aliens with curious eyes and asked in perfect galactic standard, "Are you here to learn about sharing too?" The simplicity of the question hit the council delegation like a physical blow. Out of the mouths of their young came wisdom that supposedly advanced civilizations had never considered. Later that evening, Zektar found himself alone on an observation deck, looking out at Earth. The planet was beautiful beyond imagination, blue and green and white, with cities that glowed softly in the darkness. But what struck him most was what he didn't see. No massive industrial scars, no polluted atmosphere, no signs of a world strip mined to support galactic expansion. Captain Chen joined him at the viewing wall. "Thoughts?" she asked simply. "We know I expected to find either a species preparing for conquest or one too weak to achieve it," Zektar admitted. "Instead, we find something we didn't know was possible." "What's that?" "A civilization that has grown beyond the need to prove its strength through dominance." Captain Chen nodded slowly. "It wasn't easy. We had to overcome instincts that had served us well during our evolutionary history, but became liabilities once we developed advanced technology. The ability to destroy something doesn't grant the wisdom to know whether you should. Your people could conquer half the galaxy," Zektar said. It wasn't a question. "Probably," Captain Chen agreed. "But why would we want to? Conquest creates enemies, destroys cultures, wastes resources, and ultimately makes everyone less secure. Cooperation creates friends, preserves diversity, optimizes resource use, and makes everyone stronger. The Council operates on principles of balance and mutual benefit," Zektar said, "but always with the understanding that strength ultimately determines hierarchy. You seem to have found a way beyond that." "We had help," Captain Chen said quietly. "We nearly wiped ourselves out learning these lessons. The universe gave us a second chance and we decided not to waste it." As Zektar looked out at the peaceful planet below, he realized the Council was about to face a crisis unlike any in its history. Everything they thought they knew about power, advancement, and civilization was about to be challenged by a species that had found a path no one thought possible. Tomorrow, they would visit Earth itself. Tonight, he would try to prepare his mind for revelations that might change the galaxy forever. The shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere like a feather floating on gentle winds, guided by systems so advanced they made the Council's best technology seem primitive. As clouds parted to reveal the surface below, the delegation pressed against viewports in stunned silence. Cities sprawled across continents, but they were unlike anything in galactic civilization. Instead of the geometric efficiency favored by most species, Human settlements seemed to grow organically from the landscape itself. Buildings reached toward the sky like crystalline trees, their surfaces shimmering with integrated plant life. Transportation flowed in 3 dimensions without apparent conflict or congestion. Population density readings are impossible, Dr. Omnis reported, his voice tight with confusion. These cities should be overcrowded chaos. But the livability indices are off our measurement scales. Ambassador Zektar watched a flock of what appeared to be metallic birds spiral past their shuttle, only to realize they were personal aircraft moving in coordinated patterns. How do they manage traffic flow with such complexity? Individual vehicles communicate with each other and with city management systems, explained their human pilot Maria Santos. Every trip is optimized not just for the individual, but for everyone sharing the airspace. Cooperation makes it work. They landed at what Maria called Central Park, a vast green space in the heart of one of Earth's largest cities. The delegation expected a sterile diplomatic facility. Instead, they found themselves in a garden that stretched beyond the horizon, filled with people of all ages engaged in activities that defied easy categorization. Children played games that seemed to involve reshaping matter with their minds. Teenagers worked on art projects that incorporated technologies the council didn't recognize. Adults gathered in discussion circles debating topics that ranged from poetry to quantum mechanics with equal passion. "This is a city center?" asked Councillor Vrix, her crystalline form cycling through colors indicating complete bewilderment. "One of many," Maria replied. "We learned that separating work from life from learning made people miserable, so we stopped doing it." Their guide was Dr. James Wright, an elderly human whose eyes held depth that suggested he'd lived through significant historical changes. As they walked through the park, he pointed out features that challenged every assumption about urban planning. "The towers you see aren't just residences," he explained. "Each one is a complete ecosystem. People live, work, learn, and create all within the same structure, but they're connected to thousands of others through transit systems, shared spaces, and communication networks. The energy requirements alone," Dr. Omnis began, "are met entirely through renewable sources," Dr. Wright finished. "Solar collection, wind generation, geothermal tapping, and some methods you might not be familiar with yet. We generate far more power than we consume. Then why not expand?" Zektar asked. "With unlimited energy, you could build across this entire world, support trillions of people." Dr. Wright stopped walking and turned to face the delegation. His expression was patient but serious. "The question isn't whether we could. It's whether we should. More people doesn't automatically mean better lives. We found that optimal population levels create the best outcomes for everyone." They entered one of the residential towers through what appeared to be a waterfall. Inside, the architecture defied physics in ways that made council engineers weep. Gravity seemed optional, with people walking on walls and ceilings as casually as floors. Living spaces flowed into each other like cells in an organism, providing privacy when desired and community when needed. "How long did it take to develop this technology?" asked Kirill, his 6 arms gesturing helplessly at the impossible construction. "About 300 years of continuous development," Dr. Wright replied. "But the foundation was laid over millennia of learning what doesn't work." They visited a manufacturing facility that challenged every understanding of industrial production. Instead of assembly lines and mass production, humans grew their products like plants in a garden. Raw materials entered one end of the facility and emerged as finished goods through processes that seemed more biological than mechanical. "We call it biomimetic manufacturing," explained Dr. Lisa Chen, the facility's director. "Instead of fighting natural processes, we learn to work with them. It's more efficient, produces no waste, and creates products that improve with age rather than deteriorating." "The economic implications," Councillor Vrix began, "are different from what you might expect," Dr. Chen finished. "When production costs approach zero and everything can be recycled perfectly, traditional economics stop making sense. We had to develop new ways of thinking about value and distribution." "What prevents chaos?" Zektar asked. "Without scarcity driving competition, what motivates people to contribute?" Dr. Wright smiled. "Purpose, curiosity, the satisfaction of creating something beautiful or solving a difficult problem. It turns out that when survival needs are met, People naturally want to improve themselves and their communities. They visited schools where children learned by directly interfacing with quantum computers. Their minds enhanced but not replaced by artificial intelligence. They saw hospitals where diseases were corrected at the genetic level before symptoms appeared. They toured research facilities where humans worked on projects that would benefit species they'd never met. But the most shocking revelation came when they visited what Dr. Wright called the memory gardens. "This is where we keep the records of our mistakes," he explained, gesturing to a peaceful valley filled with monuments and living memorials. Wars, genocides, environmental disasters, social injustices. We make sure every generation understands what happens when wisdom fails. The monuments were not glorifications of human achievement, but sobering reminders of human capacity for destruction. Each one included not just historical facts, but detailed analysis of the decisions that led to tragedy and the systemic changes implemented to prevent repetition. "You memorialize your failures?" Dr. Omnis asked. "Especially our failures," Dr. Wright confirmed. "Success teaches confidence. Failure teaches wisdom. We need both, but wisdom is harder to come by." As the day progressed, Zektar found himself struggling with cognitive dissonance. Everything he was seeing contradicted fundamental assumptions about advanced civilizations. Humans had achieved technological capabilities that exceeded council understanding, but they used that power to create rather than consume, to nurture rather than exploit. "There's something I don't understand," he said finally. "Your capabilities suggest you could easily expand beyond this system, colonize thousands of worlds, build an empire that would dwarf anything in galactic history. Why haven't you?" Dr. Wright was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the city where millions of humans lived in apparent harmony with their environment and each other. "We tried expansion once," he said finally. "Not galactic expansion, but expansion here on Earth. We covered continents with cities, stripped forests, polluted oceans, changed the very atmosphere. We learned that growth without wisdom is just another form of cancer." "But you recovered," Counselor Vrix pointed out. "Barely," Dr. Wright replied, "and only because we fundamentally changed how we think about success. We learned that the question isn't how much you can take, but how much you can give. Not how powerful you can become, but how much good you can do." As their shuttle lifted off for the return journey to Harmony Station, the council delegation sat in stunned silence. They had come expecting to find either a threat to assess or a weakness to exploit. Instead, they had discovered something that challenged everything they thought they knew about power. Progress and what it meant to be truly advanced. The hardest truth to accept was that humans weren't pretending to be less powerful than they were. They had simply evolved beyond the need to prove their strength through dominance. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days after the delegation's return from Earth. The Great Assembly Hall, designed to accommodate representatives from 847 member species, buzzed with tension that could be felt across multiple dimensions of existence. Ambassador Zektar stood at the central podium, his prepared report feeling inadequate to convey what they had witnessed. Around him, the greatest minds in known space waited for explanations that would make sense of the impossible. "Honored representatives," he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber, "what we discovered challenges fundamental assumptions about civilization, power, and progress that have guided the Council for millennia." The holographic displays activated, showing images from Earth that had been carefully selected to demonstrate human capabilities without revealing their full extent. Even these limited glimpses caused gasps and exclamations from the assembled delegates. High Counselor Mithran of the Vortak Empire leaned forward, his massive form casting shadows across his delegation. "You're suggesting that humans possess technology that exceeds our understanding, yet choose not to use it for expansion or conquest." "That is exactly what I'm suggesting," Zektar replied. "But more than that, they've developed social and economic systems that make our models obsolete. They've achieved sustainable abundance without scarcity-driven competition." "Impossible," declared Supreme Admiral Krexil of the Zephyrian Military Coalition. "No species can overcome the drive for territorial expansion and resource accumulation. It's evolutionary imperative." Dr. Omnis stepped forward from the delegation area. "Honored Admiral, that's what we believed as well. But humans have demonstrated otherwise. They've satisfied their survival needs so completely that their motivations have shifted to higher purposes." "Such as?" demanded Counselor Velthara of the Silicon Consortium, her electronic voice carrying skeptical harmonics. Creation rather than consumption, Dr. Omnis replied. Knowledge rather than territory. Cooperation rather than domination. They've essentially transcended the scarcity mindset that drives most civilizations. The chamber erupted in debate. Representatives argued in dozens of languages and communication methods, from sonic vibrations to chemical emissions to quantum entanglement patterns. The translation systems worked overtime to keep up with the chaotic exchange of ideas. Order, commanded High Arbiter Quansol, his crystalline staff ringing with authority. Let the delegation complete their report. Counselor Vrix projected her findings in streams of colored light that painted mathematical equations across the air. Their resource management efficiency approaches theoretical maximums. They've eliminated waste not through rationing, but through closed-loop systems that make scarcity impossible. And their military capabilities? Asked General Horath of the Defender Alliance, his scarred carapace showing evidence of countless battles. The question brought silence to the chamber. Everyone knew that military assessment was the real issue underlying all discussions. Zektar chose his words carefully. Their military capabilities are sufficient for any conceivable defense need. Beyond that, we cannot provide detailed assessment without violating diplomatic protocols. The non-answer was itself an answer. Those present who understood threat assessment recognized the implication. Human military capability was so far beyond Council understanding that detailed analysis might be considered an act of espionage or aggression. What do they want from us? Asked Merchant Prince Zolkar of the Trade Federation. No species develop such capabilities without purpose. They want to trade, Dr. Omnis replied simply. Not for resources or territory, but for knowledge, culture, and friendship. They seem genuinely interested in what other species have to offer. Preposterous, growled Admiral Krexel. It's obviously preparation for conquest. They're studying us, learning our weaknesses. For over 2 centuries? Counselor Vrix countered. If conquest was their goal, why wait? Why trade fairly? Why offer assistance to species in crisis without demanding compensation? The debate continued for hours, with representatives struggling to fit human behavior into familiar patterns. Some argued for preemptive action based on potential threat. Others proposed intensive surveillance to discern true human intentions. A few suggested attempting to steal human technology through espionage. We're thinking about this wrong, announced Dr. Kethmore, the Council's chief xenopsychologist. Her words cut through the arguing like a blade. We're trying to understand humans by comparing them to ourselves. But what if they're genuinely different? Different how? Asked High Counselor Mithran. What if they've actually evolved beyond the psychological drives that motivate the rest of us? What if scarcity-based thinking is not an inevitable characteristic of intelligence, but rather a phase that can be transcended? The suggestion was so radical that it brought momentary silence to the chamber. The idea that humans might represent a new stage of civilizational development challenged everything the Council understood about the nature of intelligent life. If that's true, said Counselor Velthara slowly, then what does it mean for the rest of us? The question hung in the air like a cosmic puzzle. If humans had truly found a way beyond competition and scarcity, what were the implications for civilizations still driven by those forces? Ambassador Zektar decided to share the moment that had most profoundly affected him during the Earth visit. A human child asked me why my people don't share their toys. When I explained that interstellar politics is more complex than playground dynamics, she said something that has haunted me. He paused, remembering the innocent face and the profound words. She said, "Grown-ups always make simple things complicated. Sharing is easy when you have enough for everyone." The chamber fell silent again.
The wisdom of a child had articulated what sophisticated political minds struggled to grasp. The question before us, Zektar continued, is not whether humans represent a threat.
It's whether they represent an opportunity to evolve beyond patterns that have trapped us for millennia. You're suggesting we learn from them? Asked High Counselor Mithran, his tone suggesting the idea was either brilliant or insane. I'm suggesting we consider the possibility that there are better ways to organize civilization than what we've always assumed was inevitable. The debate that followed would continue for days. Some species would withdraw from further contact with humans, too threatened by the implications of their existence. Others would increase diplomatic engagement, hoping to understand how human society had achieved the impossible. But deep in the archives of the Council's greatest library, scholars began researching historical precedents. What they would discover would shake the foundations of galactic civilization even further. Humans were not the first species to attempt transcendence of scarcity-based psychology. They were simply the first to succeed, and scattered across the galaxy, in archives and memory banks and ancient texts, lay the stories of other species who had tried and failed. The humans had somehow unlocked a secret that had eluded everyone else. The question was whether that secret could be shared, or whether each species had to find their own path to transcendence. The council session ended without resolution, but with a mandate to continue studying the human phenomenon. What they would learn would change everything they thought they knew about the future of intelligent life in the galaxy. Deep in the council archives, Chief Librarian Sil Andra made a discovery that would reshape galactic understanding of civilization itself. The ancient data crystal had been buried in subsection Gamma 7742, filed under historical curiosities and forgotten for over 3,000 years. The crystal contained records from the ethereal collective, a species that had vanished before the Council's formation. What made the discovery extraordinary was that their recorded behavior patterns matched human society almost perfectly. "This can't be coincidence," Dr. Omnis muttered, his tentacles working frantically over multiple data interfaces simultaneously. "The parallels are too precise." Ambassador Zektar studied the translated records with growing amazement. The ethereals had achieved sustainable abundance, eliminated scarcity-based economics, and developed technologies that seemed to violate physical laws. Like humans, they had possessed the capability for galactic conquest but had chosen cooperation instead. "What happened to them?" asked Counselor Vrix, her crystalline form shifting through colors indicating deep concern. Silandra's ancient eyes dimmed as she consulted even older records. They transcended physical existence entirely. Became beings of pure energy and consciousness. The last transmission suggests they found the material universe too limiting for their continued growth. The implications were staggering. If humans were following the same developmental path as the ethereals, they might eventually abandon physical existence altogether. The galaxy could lose its most interesting species just as contact had been established. But the archives held more secrets. Records of 17 other species that had attempted similar transcendence. 16 had failed catastrophically, destroying themselves in wars, environmental collapse, or social breakdown during the transition period. "There's a pattern," Dr. Omnis observed, his excitement building as he analyzed the data. Each species reached a critical decision point. They could either transcend their scarcity-based psychology or be destroyed by the technology they'd developed. "The Great Filter," Zektar whispered, recognizing the concept from theoretical xenobiology. Every civilization faces challenges that determine whether they survive to become truly advanced. But this suggests the final filter isn't technological development, but psychological evolution. The research team worked around the clock, driven by urgency that bordered on panic. If humans were approaching the same transcendence point as the ethereals, contact might be lost forever. Worse, the historical records suggested that species on the verge of transcendence sometimes made decisions that affected entire galactic regions. Counselor Vrix discovered the most troubling information in ethereal archives. According to these records, the ethereals attempted to help other species achieve transcendence. The results were uniformly disastrous. "How so?" Zektar asked, though he dreaded the answer. Species given ethereal technology without the psychological development to handle it destroyed themselves within decades. The ethereals concluded that each civilization must find its own path to transcendence, or the knowledge becomes poison rather than medicine. The revelation explained human restraint in sharing their most advanced technologies. They weren't being secretive or superior. They were being protective. They had learned the same lesson as the ethereals. Advanced capabilities without psychological readiness led to destruction. "But humans are different," Dr. Omnis insisted. "They've maintained physical existence for centuries after achieving transcendence-level capabilities. They're not following the ethereal pattern exactly." Silandra made another discovery that changed everything. Hidden in the deepest archives, protected by encryption that had taken decades to break, lay records from the humans themselves, records that predated their official first contact with the galaxy. "They've been watching us for over 500 years, she announced, her voice barely containing her shock. Not spying exactly, but observing, learning about galactic civilization before revealing themselves. The human records painted a picture of a species that had learned from studying the failures of their predecessors. They had observed the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations, identified the patterns that led to transcendence or destruction, and carefully planned their own approach. They're not naturally superior, Zektar realized. They're educated. They've had the benefit of watching others make mistakes and learning from those failures. The human archives contained detailed studies of every known transcendent species, complete psychological profiles of galactic civilizations, and carefully developed strategies for avoiding the pitfalls that had destroyed others. They had spent centuries preparing for contact, ensuring they would neither overwhelm other species nor be corrupted by premature exposure to galactic politics. "It's the most sophisticated anthropological study in known history," Dr. Omnis marveled. "They've understood us better than we understand ourselves." But the most shocking revelation was still to come. Buried in the files was a human document titled Project Shepherding, which outlined their long-term strategy for galactic civilization. Humans weren't just protecting themselves from the dangers of transcendence. They were trying to guide other species toward the same psychological evolution they had achieved, without the catastrophic failures that had marked previous attempts. "They're not observers," Counselor Vrix realized. "They're gardeners. They've been carefully cultivating conditions that might allow other species to achieve transcendence naturally." The evidence was overwhelming once they knew what to look for. Human trade agreements that inadvertently introduced technologies at exactly the right pace for gradual adaptation. Diplomatic interventions that prevented wars but allowed natural political evolution. Cultural exchanges that shared philosophical concepts without forcing adoption. Every interaction has been designed to promote psychological development, Zektar observed with growing awe. "They've been teaching us without us realizing we were students." The revelation transformed the Council's understanding of their relationship with humanity. They weren't dealing with a species that had mysteriously evolved beyond scarcity psychology. They were dealing with a species that had deliberately chosen to become teachers, guides helping others along a path they had already traveled. "But why?" asked Silandra. "Why spend centuries helping species that might never achieve transcendence? Why risk their own development for others?" The answer lay in the final human document they discovered, written by someone identified only as the Consensus. It was part philosophical treatise, part practical guide, and part emotional appeal to future generations. "We have learned that transcendence achieved in isolation is meaningless," the document read. "True advancement requires lifting others up with you. A garden with only one type of flower is not a garden at all, but a field. Diversity of thought, culture, and approach makes everyone stronger." "The goal is not human transcendence," the document continued. "The goal is galactic transcendence, the creation of a community of species that have all learned to move beyond scarcity psychology, while maintaining their unique perspectives and contributions." The project timeline was staggering in its scope. Humans expected the process to take thousands of years, with no guarantee of success. They were committed to a multi-generational effort that might not see results for centuries. "It's not conquest," Dr. Omnis whispered. "It's not even leadership. It's parenthood. They see themselves as parents helping children grow up." The Council faced a choice that would define the future of galactic civilization. They could reject human guidance and continue on their current path, or they could accept the possibility that there was a better way to organize society and begin the difficult process of psychological evolution. The decision would not be made in council chambers or through diplomatic negotiations. It would be made by each species individually, as they decided whether to trust in the possibility of transcendence or remain trapped in the familiar patterns of scarcity and competition. But now, at least they understood what they were really being offered. Not submission to human superiority, but partnership in the greatest experiment in the history of intelligent life. 5 years after the discovery of human intentions, the galaxy stood at a crossroads that would determine the future of intelligent life itself. The Galactic Council chambers had never hosted such a momentous gathering. with every member species sending their highest representatives to address what historians would later call the choice of ages. Ambassador Zektar looked out over the assembled delegates, knowing that each face represented billions of lives that would be affected by the decisions made here. The weight of that responsibility was almost crushing, but it was nothing compared to the weight of possibility. Captain Sarah Chen sat in the human delegation area, her presence radiating the same calm confidence that had so puzzled council members years earlier. Beside her sat other human representatives, but also something unprecedented. Ambassadors from 3 species that had already begun the transcendence process under human guidance. The Velkari had been the first to accept human assistance. Their crystalline society had naturally aligned with abundance-based thinking, and within 2 years they had eliminated scarcity economics from their civilization. Their representative, Shardsinger Kethalar, glowed with patterns that spoke of contentment and purpose rather than survival anxiety. The Morden had been more challenging. Their warrior culture had initially rejected any suggestion that competition wasn't necessary. But when humans helped them redirect their competitive drives toward creative rather than destructive ends, their society had transformed with surprising speed. War leader Garthox now spoke of battles against ignorance and poverty rather than against other species. Most surprising were the hive minds of Collectus Prime. Their group consciousness had made scarcity psychology especially entrenched, but once they achieved abundance thinking, the change had been dramatic. Their representative communicated in harmonies that conveyed joy at a cellular level. Honored delegates, High Arbiter Quanzel began, his crystalline staff ringing with formal authority. We gathered to address the most significant decision in galactic history. Humanity has offered to guide us toward what they call psychological transcendence. We must decide whether to accept this guidance. The debate that followed was unlike anything in Council history. Species after species rose to speak, sharing fears, hopes, and philosophical positions that cut to the heart of what it meant to be an intelligent being. High Counselor Mithran of the Vortak Empire spoke first. My people have built their identity on strength through competition. How can we abandon the principles that made us great? Shardsinger Cathalar responded with crystalline chimes that translated as music. We believe the same. But we discovered that cooperation creates strength that competition could never achieve. Our crystals grow larger when they support each other rather than competing for space. Pretty words, growled Admiral Krexel of the Zephyrian Military Coalition. But what happens when you encounter a species that hasn't transcended? How do you defend abundance against those who want to take it? Captain Chen stood to respond, her voice carrying clearly across the vast chamber. The same way you defend anything valuable, Admiral. But defense doesn't require aggression, and strength doesn't require dominance. We've found that most conflicts disappear when scarcity disappears. And when they don't, Admiral Krexel pressed. Then you respond with precisely the force necessary to preserve what you've built, no more and no less. But you do so from a position of abundance rather than fear, which changes everything about how conflicts resolve. Merchant Prince Zolkar raised concerns about economic implications. Our entire trade system is based on scarcity and value differentials. If everyone achieves abundance, what drives commerce? War leader Garthox laughed, a sound that would have been threatening from any other Morden but somehow conveyed warmth. Trade becomes about sharing what you create rather than hoarding what you need. We've discovered that creating beauty and sharing knowledge is far more satisfying than accumulating resources. The debate continued for hours, with each species grappling with implications that challenged their most fundamental assumptions. Some delegates argued that their cultures were too deeply rooted in competitive thinking to change. Others worried about losing their identity in the transcendence process. Dr. Omnis, who had become something of a human psychology expert, addressed the cultural concerns. Transcendence doesn't mean becoming human. Each species that achieves abundance thinking does so in their own way, maintaining their unique perspectives and contributions. But how do we know this isn't just sophisticated conquest? Demanded Counselor Velthara of the Silicon Consortium. How do we know humans aren't simply replacing direct domination with psychological manipulation? The question created uncomfortable silence. It was the fear that lurked behind every delegate's thoughts, the possibility that they were being offered slavery disguised as liberation. Captain Chen stood again, but this time her expression was serious in a way that commanded absolute attention. You raise the most important question of all, counselor. And the only answer I can give is this. Judge us by our actions, not our words. She activated a holographic display that showed the Sol system in real time. Every human ship is equipped with quantum destructors capable of sterilizing planets. Every human colony has the industrial capacity to build fleets that could conquer star systems. Every human citizen has access to technologies that could destabilize galactic civilization. The display zoomed in to show the detailed capabilities that human technology made possible. The assembled delegates watched in stunned silence as the true extent of human power was revealed for the first time. We have never used these capabilities for conquest, never threatened another species with destruction, never demanded submission in exchange for trade or assistance. We have had the power to rule the galaxy for over 3 centuries. Instead, we've spent those centuries learning to garden. Why? The question came from Dr. Kethamore, the Council's xenopsychologist, her voice barely above a whisper. Captain Chen's expression softened. Because ruling the galaxy would be the loneliest existence imaginable. What good is power without friends to share it with? What good is knowledge without curious minds to teach? What good is beauty without diverse perspectives to appreciate it? The chamber fell silent as delegates contemplated the implications. Humans had deliberately chosen connection over domination, cooperation over conquest, guidance over rule. The choice before you, Captain Chen continued, is not whether to accept human leadership. It's whether to accept the possibility that there's a better way to live than the one scarcity has taught you. Shard singer Kethalar chimed in with harmonies of support. The humans don't ask you to become human. They ask you to become the best version of yourselves. The vote, when it finally came, was not unanimous. 17 species chose to maintain their current path, too fearful or skeptical to risk change. 12 others voted to study the possibility further before committing. But 18 species voted to accept human guidance in exploring transcendence. As the session concluded and delegates began departing, Ambassador Zektar approached Captain Chen. What happens now? She smiled with genuine warmth. Now we begin the real work. Not of changing who you are, but of helping you discover who you might become. And if we fail, then we fail together and we learn from the failure. But Dr. Omnis's research suggests that species working together have a much higher transcendent success rate than those attempting it alone. As Zektar walked through the corridors of the council station, he reflected on how much had changed since that first diplomatic contact years ago. Humans had never been the mystery the council thought they were. They had been teachers waiting patiently for students ready to learn. The galaxy was about to embark on the greatest educational experiment in the history of intelligent life. Some species would succeed in transcending scarcity psychology. Others would fail and face the consequences of that failure. But for the first time in galactic history, no species would face the challenge alone. In the end, that might make all the difference. The age of competition was drawing to a close. The age of cooperation was about to begin, and in a small garden on a blue planet, human children played games that involved sharing impossible toys, blissfully unaware that they were demonstrating the principles that would reshape the galaxy.